I will forever associate Andy Gibb with my high school years. When I entered into the 9th grade, it was 1978, and Andy was riding high on the success of his first 2 albums, Flowing Rivers and Shadow Dancing. Even if you didn't like his music, you really couldn't avoid this guy. He was everywhere. Everyone knew that he was the Bee Gees' little brother, and you know what? He was even more famous and popular than they were at the time, if that was possible. Unfortunately, by the time that I had graduated from high school in 1982, Andy's fame was all but non-existent. Why? Well, my friends, this isn't a new story. Sadly, it's one that's been told time and time again. Different characters, but almost always the same outcome. Apparently, fame can be a pretty tough mistress, and for Andy, well, it was over almost before it began. But let's go back to 1978. Andy had just released the follow-up to his debut album, Flowing Rivers. Titled Shadow Dancing, the album's first single with the same name became Andy's 3rd straight #1 single in the US. The others were I Just Want to Be Your Everything and Love Is Thicker Than Water, both of which featured the musicianship of not only the other Bee Gees, but the Eagles guitarist Joe Walsh. So anyway, getting back to Shadow Dancing, the album went platinum in the US and Canada, and silver in the UK. Andy was rolling in the dough, and in the late 70s, the trendy thing to do with all that money had something to do with a little white powder. To say that Andy didn't handle his drugs well is an understatement. It impacted his ability to perform live, to promote his album, and to diversify his career. At one point in the early 80s, Andy attempted to parlay his musical career into a stage career with a gig as Joseph in the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. His Broadway gig, however, was short-lived because he simply wouldn't show up for work. Andy's brothers were worried, and they did everything that they could for him, especially Big Brother Barry, who almost single-handedly pushed Andy's musical career forward. He wrote songs for him, and when Andy was unable to sing, for whatever reason, on his 3rd studio album, 1980's After Dark, well, Barry would step in and sing it for him. Unfortunately, even the brothers' Herculean efforts couldn't stop Andy's downward slide. Failed relationships and other poor choices only exacerbated the situation that led to family friend and record producer Robert Stigwood dropping Andy from his label after that 3rd album failed to generate the same type of excitement as the previous 2 had. Speaking of failed relationships, after his divorce, Andy became involved with Victoria Principal. Victoria was riding high with her success on the television show Dallas. She seemed like the perfect person to help Andy settle down a bit and get off the crazy roller coaster life that his fame had created. The 2 of them even spent time in a recording studio after Andy heard her singing the Everly Brothers classic, All I Have to Do Is Dream, in the shower. That single, by the way, would be Andy's last. His relationship with Principal would end when she gave him an ultimatum to choose between her and drugs. Guess what? He chose poorly. So many chances. So many last-ditch efforts to save a career. One of them was a season hosting the television show Solid Gold with Marilyn McCoo. I remember watching Andy on the show and wondering, what the heck was this guy doing on the show? It seemed beneath him. Don't get me wrong, I loved Solid Gold, especially those dancers. But Andy was supposed to be a superstar. Unfortunately, Andy and the show ultimately parted ways for the same reason that he was let go from Joseph. Lack of dependability. People liked him. They liked him a lot when he actually made it a point to show up for work. So, I think most of us know how this one ended. Big Brother Barry again tried to come to the rescue to help Andy get a new record deal with Island Records, or even, at one point, they considered making him a legitimate member of the Bee Gees. And those were the news items that I remember hearing about in the late 80s before news broke that Andy had passed away just 5 days after his 30th birthday in 1988. Andy had, to his credit, tried valiantly to kick his drug habit, and even though some claim, including Andy's ex-wife, that his passing was from natural causes, it is really hard to escape the fact that Andy's body had been ravaged over time from drugs and alcohol. So much talent, so much support from friends and family that really wanted to see him succeed. Andy's story is truly one of triumph, and then tragedy. In its wake, we have some really, really wonderful music filled with Andy's youthful exuberance before fame came crashing down. So let's leave it at that. His gifts, well, they remain. You can find them on Spotify, YouTube, or any other streaming service that's out there. Now it's your turn, folks. Please share your memories in the comments section. And if you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. What the heck, maybe even consider subscribing to the channel. I talk about music from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. You know, the good stuff. But most importantly, thank you so much for watching.